Welcome along to another edition of Matchbooks NFL Podcasts. Week 10, decent. Not terrific, not amazing, but decent. Rob Pizzola is on board. Rob, you had the best week of everyone. Dallas minus 9.5. The Eagles plus 3. Your best bet, the Saints plus 3. Lovely cover there, hoping that they missed a 2-point conversion. One of those weird dynamics where you're rooting for a team, and then when they want to get a 2-point, just no interest, absolutely no interest. But Rob, yeah, good week for you, bud.
Yeah, it's great. I mean, it's always nice when you win a week in the NFL, but obviously keeping momentum and winning multiple weeks in a row is great. So I don't want to be like a rock star and live in the past or anything. Hopefully we can get another win this week.
And Drew Dinsick's also on board. Drew, you called it right with the Chiefs minus 2, 1.88. Good job.
Yeah, that was a fun one. Good to end Sunday on a note like that. Otherwise, it was a tough day for me. I just gotta, my best bets have been relatively fair reads. Everything else, I just should fire it into the sun. So that's kind of the way it's gone for me this NFL season.
Yeah, best bets have been on point. Sommer, unlucky, mate. Vikings charge is a weird one. You got the best of the number, went off 53.5, 54-ish in certain places. 1.83, you back to 52. No points in the first quarter in that game. It was a weird one, but still, it should have probably got up.
Yeah, so I think that the first quarter screwed the whole game. Yes. But also in the end, I had some hope that we would see that typical punt from Mike Zimmer on 4th and 2. And then all of a sudden, he went for it and they converted. So that was pretty disgusting to see when you have that expectation from Mike Zimmer.
Yeah.
But it was the right call from him, and he basically sealed the game, and we had no shot at the over anymore.
Yeah, what's rare isn't wonderful, I would suggest. But on our best bets, we've had 18 winners from 28 selections, 64%, and that's a 26% ROI through the first 10 weeks of the NFL season. It's not bad. Let's be honest about it. It's not bad at all. A lot to get through for week 11. We've got the Cowboys, Chiefs first, Packers, Vikings second, Saints, Eagles, Colts, Bills, and of course, as ever, we'll have any other bets and best bets. All right, let's get to it. Chiefs, Cowboys. Chiefs, the home team here in Kansas City. Current betting as we have it at matchbook.com. You can back the Dallas Cowboys at 2.24. The Kansas City Chiefs at 1.73. The Cowboys getting a 2.5-point start on the main handicap line at 2.04. 56 the total. Not surprising that is a high one. Drew Dinsick, you went through well with the Chiefs last week. What are you thinking this week?
Well, obviously everything's fixed. One big win against the Raiders. Everything's fine now. Mahomes is back in the MVP race. Chiefs back at the top of the board in the AFC. I'm being a little bit facetious. I think the true result was Chiefs minus 2.5 was the correct play in that. I don't dispute that. But they did catch the positive end of variance in a couple of key areas. We have been saying, I think everyone has said it on this show, and I've heard it many other places, that eventually the turnover luck will bounce in the direction of the Chiefs. And that was obviously the case in that game. They did not come away with, they didn't have the key red zone turnovers that we've seen them be kind of a key characteristic of that team. And then on the flip side, they get the very lucky turnover from Deshaun Jackson, which is still one of the funniest plays I've seen all season. The result is what it is, a blowout on the hands of the Chiefs. They welcome the Cowboys, who also had, an extremely impressive performance at home against the Falcons. That was one of the most complete games we've seen any team play all season. They're pretty right physically. However, this is a similar setup where the type of defense they run and the personnel that they have, particularly in the secondary, I don't see matching up especially well with the kind of the secret recipe for stopping Mahomes. That it's tough for me to really kind of shake my bias that Mahomes is still, capable of putting up 40 points on a given night if you're going to roll out a defense that has, anything other than too high safety coverage. Dan Quinn, not a guy that I, really have a ton of respect for in terms of his defensive scheming. I think the Cowboys defense is largely living on the back of some pretty, outstanding opportunistic secondary play. The picks by Diggs and just in general, the risk taking that they have lived by has benefited them. But that same ethos, that same mentality in this game is going to get them burned. Tyreek Hill is looking a little healthier. He's got a little bit more separation, a little bit more speed. He's running the deep routes with a little bit a little bit more sincerity. And so I think that's a problem here for Dallas. And so this sets up a lot like Dallas, Tampa Bay in my mind. Week 1, where this is going to have to, you're going to have to score points if you're going to expect to keep up with the Chiefs in this one or even beat them. They can do that. The Chiefs defense is not as good as they have shown us over the last 4 weeks. That's surely the case. If Dallas rolls out of bed and their offensive line can dictate and they are getting the best out of their unbelievable set of wide receivers, then, they absolutely have a puncher's chance in this one. The market has been pretty funny to watch. We saw Kansas City open up in money line. We'll just look at the money line. They opened up -123. It gets bet up to -144 before there's a little bit of comeback this last day or so on Dallas. That all makes sense to me. But if you made me pick a side here and you're going to give me Chiefs under 3 against a defense that I don't think can reasonably stop Mahomes, then I'll take the Chiefs.
Sommer, what do you think with this one? I think you're leaning Cowboys here. It's a tricky game to call, Sommer.
Yeah, absolutely. And all valid points about the Chiefs. And just hypothetically speaking, so let's assume that the Chiefs offense is completely back. They are back to that top tier level of elite of offensive play. And if we assume that's the case, I'm questioning whether that's still enough to beat a very good Cowboys offense. So if I would ask you guys to rank your top 3 offenses right now, I would guess that everyone would call the Dallas Cowboys or the current state of the Dallas Cowboys among your top 3, top 4, probably. So elite offensive line, Michael Gallup is back, Dak is back healthy. And I wonder if the Chiefs defense can hold up against that really, really good Cowboys offense. So the Chiefs defense was on a historically bad pace starting the season. And since week 6, they have been performing really solid. They have been improving, but they've also faced the Washington football team, the Titans, the Giants, the Green Bay Packers without Jordan Love, and the Las Vegas Raiders. None of those offenses ranks above 19th in the UA. So I don't think that the Chiefs really switched up some things. They've just been facing some below average offenses. I would like to know whether Tyron Smith is back, because I think Melvin Ingram against Terrence Steele on the outside and Chris Jones over Connor Williams on the inside, there could be some solid matchups for the Chiefs defense. But in general, if Tyron Smith is back, you have your full arsenal of weapons. Dalton Schultz is an amazing tight end this season. I just don't see how the Chiefs will be able to defend the run against that offense, and B, I don't think they have the cornerbacks to contain Michael Gallup, Amari Cooper, and CeeDee Lamb. So at that price, currently, I would certainly rather look towards the Cowboys, because even if we assume that the Chiefs offense is back, I still don't know whether they are necessarily a tier better than the Cowboys. And the Cowboys are also entering the game with a at least slightly better defense, so to speak. I have some concerns about Dan Quinn rolling out his cover 3 coverages like the Raiders did last week. That would be my major concern. But even if he does, I think that the Cowboys have all the offensive firepower to go toe-to-toe, and that could be a coin flip game in the end, and the last drive wins. I'm right now having a hard time going against that Cowboys offense at the current market price.
Rob Pizzola, the old saying goes, one swallow doesn't make a summer. One win against Las Vegas Raiders defense and, Patrick Mahomes getting together, that's probably not going to just fix all of Kansas City's ills either.
Not a saying that I'm personally familiar with.
It's a classic.
I mean, it's not one that I personally use in my vocabulary, but yeah, I'll pick up a lot of what Suma was saying there, because I think he made some really great points. And to me, this would be almost a guaranteed buy on the Dallas Cowboys if I knew that they were going to come out and play the defense that pretty much every defense has been playing against the Chiefs this year. Yeah. And this is not something new. We know that there's like this blueprint to shut down Mahomes. It's a lot of too high safety looks, prevent the big plays, force the Chiefs to march down the field, and they're going to make some mistakes. Except the Raiders didn't do that last week. We know Gus Bradley is a big cover 3 guy. You'd figure that he would try to adapt his defense to follow what has worked against the Chiefs, but he didn't do that. And now the Cowboys have another big cover 3 guy in their defensive coordinator, Dan Quinn. So Is Quinn going to adapt and follow that blueprint from earlier in the year? I don't know. But what I do know is that the Dallas defense forces turnovers at an incredibly high rate. And Kansas City's offense turns the ball over at an incredibly high rate. And even last week, when they got away with no turnovers, I mean, Tyreek Hill fumbled in that game, ended up recovering his own fumble. Patrick Mahomes had 2 turnover-worthy plays last week, got away with both of them. I'm just not ready to anoint the Chiefs as being back. And I do include some priors in my numbers as well, because I think that's important. But if I were to strip out the priors going into this year of what we thought the Chiefs were going to be, it'd be very, very difficult for me to get anywhere near this number. I could argue that the Cowboys are a better team than the Chiefs right now, and this game is probably a pick. Including those priors, I get closer to it. But ultimately, I trust the Cowboys defense to get off the field more than I do the Chiefs defense in this particular matchup. So to me, it's Dallas or nothing. I maybe the Chiefs prove me wrong and they go on a late season run here, but I feel like they still haven't gotten over that defense that's been beating them this year. They haven't really been able to figure that out yet, and teams can still employ that against them. And I think that's probably what Dallas is going to do this week.
Yeah, I'm not totally sure if we have a bet here, Rob, but if you are backing the Cowboys on Sunday night, do you back them there at 2.25 or like a plus 125, or do you take them with the 2.5 point start at even money?
So with the total at 56, the points are worth less, the 1 and 2. But just in general, we have seen over the course of the last few years, the 1 and 2, which used to be dead numbers, are no longer dead numbers. So I'm actually much more inclined nowadays to even take the 2.5 points. Rob Pizzola 3-4 years ago would never do that. But with the 2-point conversions, the missed extra points, I don't mind the 2.5.
All right. Not a bet there for us, but look, it's a fascinating matchup, and you probably have your own mind made up about that. One of the guys may have tipped you over the edge. NFC North is where we're going next. The Packers at the Vikings. Potentially a good game. Vikings still can't get a read on any of them. So the Packers, you can back at 1.76. The Vikings at 2.2. The Vikings are 2.5 point underdog on the main handicap line at 1.97. It's 1.97 on the other side of that, minus 2.5 for the Packers. 49 is the total. Sommer, we discussed briefly the Vikings game against the Chargers last week. You think they could be the value here on this one? By the way, I was just looking here as well. 8-1, the Packers are against the spread this season. If you're backing them every week, you're just making money.
Yeah, absolutely. So I think that the Packers right now might be a tiny little bit overrated going into this week. The Vikings have a clear path to offense. They want to run the ball, and they have recently figured out that they have a wide receiver whose name is Justin Jefferson.
He's pretty good.
And the Packers defense has been phenomenal over the past couple of weeks, but they still are extremely underwhelming against the run. And the Vikings, I don't think whether it matters so much, but they're getting their center Garrett Bradbury back from the COVID list. And I think that there is a clear advantage for the Vikings to be able to run the ball on the Packers defense, who are now down Zadarius Smith. Whitney Merciless went to IR, and there's the potential that Rashan Gary might also miss this week's game. And Rashan Gary has been really good for them this week. So that leaves them basically with only Preston Smith on the outside and Kenny Clark on the inside. And Kenny Clark, I don't think that he was that brutal force against the run. If he was, their run defense metrics would probably be a lot better. But Green Bay, even though they were very good against the pass, without Jair Alexander, they had some issues defending the run. And I think the Vikings will be able to run the ball. And I also don't see how the Packers secondary is able to defend Justin Jefferson. If that's another 10+ targets game for him, I really think that the Vikings offense could be able or should be able to move the ball on the Packers. And then on the other side, the Vikings have some issues. They get Harrison Smith back. His backup, Cameron Bynum, was actually pretty good over the past 2 weeks. So I wonder how Mike Zimmer is going to incorporate some 3 safety looks potentially, maybe with some disguised zone coverages behind it. The Packers O-line is still a little bit in shambles. Josh Myers, their center, is still on IR. David Bakhtiari, I don't know. he's off the pup list and he's activated because they had to, because their practice window would have closed. But it still doesn't sound really optimistic that Bakhtiari will be back this week. He might need another 2 to 3 weeks. And then I don't think I don't know whether the Packers offense has that high of a floor to outscore the Vikings in this matchup. And I kind of lean towards the Vikings right now. I'm not far away from the current market price, but if you put a gun to my head right now, I would rather go with the Vikings than with the Packers.
Yeah, Drew, pick it up.
Yeah, Vikings, I've played them. I think overall in the market right now, the Packers, just on the basis of the fact that they are number one in the standings in the NFC, people are overrating that team to a degree. And then, the Vikings, obviously, they haven't even really played a bad game this year. They're 4-5. They could have won every single one of those games that they lost. In fact, they probably should have won at least 3 of those, including the Bengals week 1, the Cardinals week 2, and the Cowboys game week 8. Even the Ravens game week 9 was right. They were right there in that game. If the ball bounces a little differently, Green Bay Packers could have lost 3 games as well. They could have lost the Niners game. They could have lost the Bengals game. They could have lost the Cardinals game. And so I think we're staring at, and actually what's funny is 2 of those are common opponents. The Bengals and the Cardinals got lucky wins against the Vikings and unlucky losses against the Packers. You flip some of the results around, ball bounces a little differently. These 2 teams are probably tied at the top of the NFC North, and there's not a lot of distinction really between them in terms of quality of offense, especially. And then all of Suma's points are super relevant. Green Bay's defense comes in as poor as they have been at any point this entire season. Rashawn Gary matters a ton because he has been the only guy that's been able to consistently generate pressure for them in the absence of Zadarius Smith. And then, we know that they have some issues on the with secondary pieces that haven't been able to take the field. So, you have basically, Kirk Cousins can hunt Kevin King in this game. Go get him. Go get Kevin King. Go target him on, half your dropbacks. And I think Green Bay is going to be able to score relatively comfortably. My issue with this game entirely, and playing the Vikings money line entirely comes down to Ken Zimmer slam the door. We saw him do it last week, but the Vikings have tended to let teams back into games with their kind of less than aggressive approach as they have had leads in second halves here. And so this is going to be a roller coaster. It's going to be a sweat. But I backed Minnesota on the money line, and I'm prepared to basically sweat this out for 4 quarters. Rob, are you with me on Minnesota?
Yeah, so I haven't bet Minnesota, but let's make it a sweep in terms of I at least lean to the Minnesota side in this game. And I think you made a lot of good points, Drew, where if you just strip away the records from the Packers and the Vikings and you were to put their resumes side by side, a lot of people would have a tough time differentiating these 2 teams or saying one of these is significantly better than the other. And I think a lot of people think that the Packers, at least in the recreational betting community, are so good because of their record. And the Vikings, like you mentioned, lost all these close games, whether that's 2 overtimes. That week 2 against the Cardinals was like a gimme field goal that they missed at the end of the game as well. So it could be a very different story for the Vikings. And for me, the big thing is how well Minnesota's defense has held up with all the injuries that they've endured. And sometimes I think we get carried away with like these cluster injuries that happen on defense or a ton of defensive players being out and forget that Mike Zimmer is just a very good defensive coach. Their defensive coordinator, Andre Patterson, has done a really good job because they're without their top edge rusher, Daniil Hunter. Their top player in the secondary, Harrison Smith, was on the COVID list last 2 weeks. Their best interior run stopper, Mike Pierce, has missed most of the year. Patrick Peterson on IR, Anthony Barr out last week. And they've faced a very difficult schedule of opposing offenses. Like when you look at these teams across the board, Cincinnati, Arizona, Seattle, Cleveland, Dallas, Baltimore, the Chargers last week, this is a team that the defense has held up much better than I think people would actually give them credit for holding up. So ultimately, the Vikings home field advantage, while we can argue about home field advantage in the NFL, if it exists, they have the biggest one, or at least one of the biggest ones in the entire NFL right now. Big divisional game, just in general. I find it difficult to get to this price tag on Green Bay. My only caveat would be Green Bay finds a way to win these games. They always find a way. And we can go back last year. the year before, people will say Green Bay's a fraud. Look at the Packers' records in close games, and they just find a way. That's what I'm scared about. But I do think that the Vikings are the right side of this game.
Yeah, Drew, one of your best bets last year, week 1, this very fixture. You were on the Packers. Probably a similar price, wasn't it? They were the underdogs in that one.
Yeah, there was a very very different scenario there, and that was that without preseason, without offseason, the Vikings trotted out 4 inexperienced quarterbacks, and Aaron Rodgers just had an absolute field day in that matchup. If you take that one kind of sample, that one game out of the sample, and you look at Zimmer versus Aaron Rodgers over the balance of their head-to-heads, though, it's been very, very positive for Zimmer. He generally holds this team around 20 at or around 20 points. And if they can do that this weekend, then they are 100% live for the upset. I think we take them at 2.2.
Yeah, I like it. Money line, Vikings 2.2, the first consensus play of the podcast. Good to see it. Next game we have is the New Orleans Saints at the Philadelphia Eagles. Rob, I'll leave with you here first for this one. But let's take a look at the betting as we have it at matchbook.com. The Saints, you come back at 2.06 on the money line. The Eagles are 1.86. Saints getting a 1 point start on the main point spread line at 1.7 at matchbook.com. 43 is the total. Rob, it's a tricky game, but a potentially good game. The Eagles, are they sneaky good, or are we just are we getting a small but fooled at the moment?
I think it's time to pump the brakes on the Eagles being good conversation. Look, okay, I have a couple looks in this game, and then I'll throw it to the other guys, and maybe we can come to some sort of consensus. But I like the Saints, and I like the under based off the way that I see this game unfolding. And yes, the Eagles played a really good game against Denver last week, who was missing 3/5 of their starting offensive line, missing pretty much their entire front seven on defense. We're very quick to forget that they lost to the Chargers at home a couple weeks ago. The Chargers haven't really been doing a whole lot of anything lately. You can throw out the win from 3 weeks ago against the Detroit Lions. I don't think that means anything because everybody except the Steelers seems to beat up on the Lions. But the reason I really like this matchup for the Saints is that the Eagles have been able to run the ball over all these run defenses recently. Detroit, Chargers, Denver with injuries up front. Everybody was calling for the Eagles to run the ball more earlier in the year. The last month or so, they've run it more than any team in the NFL. Now they go from all these terrible run defenses to the number 1 DVOA defense against the run, number 1 success rate against the run. And the Saints employ a very similar style of offense. I mean, Trevor Siemian's played well since he's taken over from an injured Jameis Winston, but the Saints are still a team that wants to pound the rock, limit mistakes from their quarterback position. They have a higher run frequency over expected on first, second, and third down. They are going to run the ball. And I'm not typically a fan of conservative offenses, but the Eagles are not good at stopping the run. They're 20th in DVOA, 24th in run D success rate. So I think both of these teams have a very clear style right now. That's running the ball to set up the passing attack. I think this is a matchup that's much more catered to New Orleans being able to successfully do that. And because of that, I make them the favorite in this game. I think there's value on the money line as an underdog. And because of that, I also like the under in a game where I think that we're not going to see a lot of clock stoppages. We're going to see not a lot of big explosive runs, big explosive plays. Both teams happy to play a field position type of game. So I'm with Saints and the under 43.5 here.
Yeah, Drew, you also kind of thought the early look here was on the under.
I did. And at the end of the day, I backed down mostly just because Hurts really had, Hurts came in late last season. I know you guys will remember this. The Carson Wentz experience did not go well. And they finally pulled the rug and put in Jalen Hurts at the end of the season to see if they could kind of still steal the NFC East. And the big kind of coming out game for him was against the Saints. And he was very good. And realistically, just his style of offense matches up pretty well with what the Saints want to do defensively, which is confuse you with coverages. And, the Saints defense is elite. Don't get me wrong. They stop the run at an exceptionally high rate, and they are very, very tough to pass with like traditional passing offense. The one area where they do tend to struggle is against quarterbacks like Hurts. And so that has me a little trepidatious about getting involved with the under here. I'm going to eventually sit this one out, but I agree that, just on paper, this is a bad price. The Saints should probably be small favorites, not small dogs. And I'm curious if the market makers who go to the well and bet the Philadelphia Eagles every week, like it's their job, if that's coming this week, if they're going to push them out to 3, I have a sense that if just patterns would tell you that if you have an appetite to bet the Saints, taking them on Wednesday is probably not the right call. You should wait until Saturday. You may get a better number.
All right, Sumo, what are you thinking here about?
So first of all, I mean, the Saints practice report is going to be a little bit interesting today. We want to see what Alvin Kamara and Terron Armstead are going to do in practice today. I think having those 2 guys should absolutely help the Saints, but I also agree with everything that Drew and Rob have said. I basically just noted all those rushing defense metrics from recent Eagles opponents, but Rob already said everything about it. Lions 29th, Chargers 32nd, Denver 23rd in DVOA, Saints first. Completely different matchup, in my opinion. And the Eagles over the past 3 weeks had a 63% rush rate on early downs, by far the most. And they are ranking 13 EPA per play and 4th in success rate on those downs. So the question is, will they alter all their offensive approach that has been working over the past 3 weeks? Or are they going to say, hey, we are going to throw the ball on the Saints and see what Jalen Hurts got? I would probably lean towards the former. Dallas Goedert is in the concussion protocol. Might be tough for him to play this week. And I also think that this game tells me a little bit about how the betting market has evolved over the years, because I think a few years ago, 2016-17, that game is probably -3 Eagles. After those 3 great offensive performances, Saints have lost their last 2 games.
Mm-hmm.
So I would guess that 4 or 5 years ago, that's probably -3, also with much bigger home field advantage. So that was something that came across my mind today. But I would also definitely lean towards the Saints. What's also interesting is that in recent weeks, some major groups have pounded the rock on the Saints and the Eagles. I guess last week the Eagles were +3 at some point against Denver, +3 -15, and at kickoff they were somewhere around pick'em. So there was some strong support. Gonna be interesting whether the Saints or the Eagles see support going forward.
Bit of a coaching mismatch here, I would suggest too, potentially. Yeah. If you're getting Sean Payton odds against Nick Sirianni, then it seems 2.06. I know it's never that simple. I know there's a whole lot more goes into it, but Rob Pizzola, you agree with that? Even that angle?
Oh, I do. There's so many different angles and approaches we could take for this game. I think very misleading results last week as well. The Saints kind of got jobbed by the Jerome Boger crew in that Tennessee game as well. And who knows what this price is if they end up winning that game. There's a lot of it, but yes, I do agree that it's a very substantial coaching mismatch as well. Although verdict is still out on the Philly coaching situation. I mean, we've seen coaching staffs that look poor early on and then they kind of grow into a mold. And I mean, we've seen Brandon Staley, who looked like an elite coach from the first month of the season, kind of fall off a cliff. So it's very variable. But yes, Peyton is a guy that I typically like to back.
Drew, do you want to come back in there? I can't open my private chat at the moment.
Yes, sure. The coaching mismatch is real, and I mean, honestly, that may be the only nugget you really need to get on board with the Saints here, because you have an offensive scheme that is even without the any talented players in terms of skill position for the Saints. This Philadelphia Eagles defense, a 10-year-old could scheme up something that would work against them, the way that they roll out very, very basic defensive scheme. So I would expect that certainly Peyton has a couple of tricks up his sleeve because the Saints call by Rob last week for his play of the week was that really should not have been a sweat. There was a unfortunate fumble, missed extra points, some very beneficial refereeing at times in favor of the Titans, and it still got there. I think the way that the way Simeon looked against that defense, I don't see any reason why it wouldn't be a lot of the same stuff. And it will work against this Eagles team that really gives you stuff over the middle in the range where Simeon can complete passes. So, I'm going to think more about this game. Ultimately, the Saints, I believe, are the right side. And this may make my card by the end of the week. But again, I think waiting is probably the right strategy based on how aggressively Philly's been bet every week.
All right, yeah, I get it, but I will lock in the Saints here 2.06 anyway. And Suma was in private chat. My producer was telling me that it was breaking news. Flacco starting QB for the Jets, Suma. So I'll watch that market collapse. Yeah.
I mean, Joe Flacco, really?
Well, they traded a pick. They might as well start him at this point. Or else there's no reason. He's just rotting away on the bench. But that's
they get a 6th-round conditional for Flacco or something like that.
Something like that.
Yeah.
I still have no idea why that trade was ever made. But obviously now they're starting him. So I mean, he gets in. But that's a really dire quarterback situation there.
Really dire. All right, Saints is the pick in that previous game, and just to confirm at 2.06. Don't forget, you can check out a recap of these bets. We have more coming, I promise that, but there's a bit of division on the main games. Insights.matchbook.com is the place to check out these selections each and every week, about 2 and 3 hours post-recording on Wednesdays. Last game in the main slate we want to look at is the Indianapolis Colts at the Buffalo Bills. Buffalo Bills, brand new Super Bowl favorite this week, because that's what happens when you put 40+ points on the New York Jets. You have to be a Super Bowl favorite after that. It cures all evil, let me tell you. Colts currently getting back at 3.7 in Western New York on Sunday. Even the Bills are 1.33. Colts getting a 7-point start, 2.0 and 50 is the total. Drew Dinsick, potential weather in Buffalo on Sunday evening?
Well, potential influence of weather in terms of how this game unfolds. Obviously, the Colts are a funny team because they're a dome team, but the way that they're built, they actually are built to perform pretty well in bad weather. So they may be just fine. On the flip side, Josh Allen's inconsistency passing the ball this year has been notable. And if there's wind in this game, then I'm not going to be in love laying the points with the Bills against a formidable opponent that can get it done on the ground. In general, the Bills defense invites you to run. That's what the Colts want to do anyway. So the Colts should find some offensive success in this one. My lean would be to the over if there's not wind, because then we can expect Buffalo to absolutely pick apart a very overrated defense for the Colts. In general, I find both of these teams kind of overrated. The Bills have played exactly no one, and they actually have not looked great against some nobodies. And then on the flip side, the Colts are coming off of 3 or 4 games in a row in a dome against teams that stink. So they're probably at the top of their price point in the market, just based on their recent outcomes and just where they've been playing. So this is a kind of a funny matchup between two teams that I would love to sell high on. I think you can probably sell high on both of these defenses with a total that's a little shy. Last year's playoff intensity, wild card game, cold day in Buffalo. And we had a total that was like 52.5 or something. Like it was on the high side of 51. And then, not a lot of difference really between these two teams that squared off in the wild card game and these teams. Carson Wentz is doing a very, very good Phillip Rivers impression. And I would say the fact that it's on the low side of 51 is surprising. And I think ultimately, if we get kind of the A-OK that there's going to be under 15-mile-an-hour winds, then I'm probably going to fire an over on this.
Yeah, Rob Pizzola, you're not a buyer of the Bills in the spot?
I'm not. I agree with Drew. I'm not a buyer of either of these teams. I think the first note I made this week is I'd like to fade both these teams going forward because I think they're both overvalued. But I think the Bills may be more so than any other team in the league. And if we look at EPA per play, from an EPA per play perspective, Buffalo has played the easiest schedule of opposing offenses, and they've played the easiest schedule of opposing defenses through 10 weeks of the season. The combined record of the teams they face this year are 33, 51, and 1. That includes a game against Tennessee, who's 8-2. So you strip that out, and it's horrible. Despite having played that schedule, Josh Allen has 13 turnover-worthy plays. That's the second most in the entire league. If we strip out garbage time for this Bills offense, their offense ranks 12th in EPA per play, 24th in offensive success rate. Despite having played not a single elite defense this year, 24th in offensive success rate. And I really don't think we can take anything away from their defense. I know they've performed very well, but I think it's fair to question how good they actually are as well. Statistically speaking, obviously it's hard to find a flaw, but I question their ability to stop the run. The only run offense they faced this year that has a pulse was the Titans. Derrick Henry went off for 143 yards, 3 touchdowns on 20 carries in that game. They don't have the personnel to disrupt this Colts running game. And I think as long as the Colts can get the running game going, they're going to be more than competitive in this game because it doesn't force Carson Wentz to have to convert a lot of huge third downs and do a lot against this elite pass rush. And frankly, the Colts this year, when they've stepped up in class, I mean, they have close losses to the Rams and to the Ravens. They beat the 49ers. They had the close overtime loss to the Titans a few weeks ago. So to me, I'm not getting to this number here. I think there's value in Indianapolis. And I think this is a matchup that they can exploit against this Bills defense.
Suma, anything here, mate? I know it's early in the week for this one. Anything that would tip you over the edge either ways?
Just a few quick thoughts. I think that what I like for the Bills in this specific matchup is that the Colts have a good run defense and a bad pass defense. And the one thing that the Bills have always excelled at under Brian Daboll is not going to pound the ball against a good run defense. I expect them to come out with a 75% pass rate on early downs and really expose that secondary, because the Colts have both starting safeties on IR. Xavier Rhodes is banged up. And when the Bills spread them out with 4 wide receivers and maybe Dawson Knox, I just don't see how the Colts defense can generate a lot of stops. So that would, from a Tennessee perspective, make me lean, if all, closer to the Bills. I think the current market price is completely fair. I'm also around 7 in this one, maybe a little bit shaded towards the Bills, just because I think that the Colts defense in the secondary is too soft and Josh Allen can really cause some damage against them.
Hey, Drew, let me come back to you for 1 second. I mentioned it there at the top that the Bills, I know that this Super Bowl race is going to be pretty wide open. Why are they the favorites? Are they justifiable favorites?
Oh, man. It's the same issue with why is Josh Allen in the discussion for MVP. Like, the
not only in discussion, he's the current favorite across
that is mind-meltingly stupid in my opinion. I haven't seen anything from Josh Allen this year that warrants that, but some of it is liability. I'm sure the Bills were a very, very popular team preseason. They made it to the AFC Championship game and lost last year. Everybody looks at them in the offseason, sees that they're bringing the band back, and they're like, oh, well, the Bills are going to take a step forward. This year, they're going to the Super Bowl. That's my pick, right? There's a consistency that you see year over year in these futures markets. And similarly with Josh Allen, he was the second choice last year in the MVP race. So it's like, well, this year he's going to be the winner, right? People are expecting progression from this team. And, combine that with the fact that they have a very easy schedule that puts them in the driver's seat for the 1 seed. We know that the Titans are there now, but there's an expectation the Titans will come back to earth with, some tests coming up on their schedule. Obviously not that many very difficult looking ones by the eye test, but who knows? So the idea of the Bills getting a 1 seed, having home games in the frozen, Orchard Park, setting, also with the bye, being healthy, all that combines to give them some mathematical likelihood that they actually do get there. They potentially are only going to have to win 2 games. Now the AFC is absolutely loaded, and things may break in their favor. Like every team that has a good enough offense to go toe to toe with them in a playoff setting may either miss them by path or get eliminated before they have to play them. Like that's entirely possible. You can set up a reasonable path where they may get the Titans and the Patriots, Patriots and the Titans or something like that in the playoffs. At which point it's like, oh, well, if that's their path to get to the Super Bowl, then obviously they ought to be, a very favorable price. But I think at this point, if we've learned nothing else this season, the NFL is a lot flatter than it has been in past years. There's really no super standout teams in terms of being able to just dictate games and really warrant any kind of serious market consensus as far as favoritism goes. And I think just if there's any kind of shading towards the Bills, towards Josh Allen in these markets, my guess is that it's liability from the preseason and not really reflecting true odds. So, if you want to take some shots against these guys, I think now is a fair time.
Yeah, the good thing is you can lay the Buffalo Bills just under 7-1 currently a match booking. You have the whole field playing for you. If you want to tie up a few quid, or a few dollars, or a few euro, or a few pounds until January and the playoffs come,
So
that is okay.
huge question about doing that is, are you going to gain equity between now and when the playoffs get here? And that's not a guarantee because they could it could break their way in that they get to the 1 seed. However, obviously there's been a lot, and honestly, this is something I'm curious what these other guys' takes are, because we're not going to get to this team or this game, I don't think. But how good are the Patriots actually? You know, like are the Patriots a threat to beat the Bills head to head and potentially steal the AFC East? Because if you're going to lay if you're going to lay against the Bills, like, you're really only gaining equity if the Patriots upset them. That's really all that they have on their schedule that you can look at and point to and say that looks like trouble. They have, I think they play the Bills, the Bucks also, which is potentially a fourth loss, but still, you really need them to take a fifth loss to get them out of the running for the 1 seed if you want to gain equity on a lay against the Bills, and that implies that you have some confidence that the Patriots can get it done. And I don't know how I feel about that.
You're asking the wrong guy about the Patriots. I've gotten New England wrong, not only this year, but for 2 decades. So I think there's clearly a step down to the Patriots, and I think they're a little bit overvalued in market right now, but there's really not that much separating all these top teams in the AFC, right? Okay. Like, the gap between all these teams is virtually nothing. Like, we're talking about who would be favored in this game, and it's all going to be spreads that are under a field goal if they're facing 100%. Each other, no matter what the venue is. So can any of these teams beat any of these teams? Sure. And I mean, the Patriots are still really well coached. I mean, I rag on Belichick sometimes for the in-game decisions, but you look at what he's done to some of these opposing teams, and he just makes them look like they're complete garbage. And I think that's kind of like a hidden factor and always has been for them. So can New England make a run? Absolutely. Do I think that they're better than Buffalo? No. But could they upset them? Like, it wouldn't even it's not even surprising if that happens to me.
We did small YouTube clips there last week when we were having the producer Dan. I tipped up Patriots 36.0 mainly as a kind of a trading option. You know, if they get to the single digits, you can lay it off and block and profit. They're now 24.0. They win on Thursday night. We're recording this on Wednesday. They probably go to about maybe 20. All right, they're only playing the Falcons. Doesn't make any difference. But I mean, if you're looking in terms of different prices there in the AFC East, I don't know, that looks a better value bet. Well, it definitely was a better value bet at 36.0 last week. We'll move on. Rob Pizzola, Seahawks, tough loss last week in Lambeau, but you fancy them to bounce back against Arizona.
I wouldn't say that precisely. I just think that there's a lot of upside in betting Seattle right now. So part of what I'm getting, and this kind of reminds me of, let's say, Carolina, Arizona last week. If you took an early bet on Carolina, your worst case scenario is that Kyler Murray plays and you're basically coin flipping at whatever the spread is. But that's implying that Kyler Murray is also fully healthy. And I think in this situation here, it looks like Kyler Murray is going to play. It seems much more likely this week than a week ago. But how limited is that offense going to be? With Kyler Murray coming off of an injury, we've seen it so many times this year where quarterbacks in their first start back, they just don't look like themselves. We actually saw it last week with Russell Wilson. We saw it with Aaron Rodgers last week, both teams in that game, where you have a week off. Dak Prescott. Like, I can think of countless examples where it's just not really easy to return to that game form. To me, this is probably the lowest the Seahawks have been valued in market with Russell Wilson at quarterback. Like, people are completely writing them off as the season's over. There's still one wildcard spot that's very much up for grabs in the NFC right now. I mean, there's 5 teams that are very likely to make it, or 6, I should say, but there's one that's very much up for grabs, and Seahawks can do that. So this is a very important game for them. Season's not over by any stretch of the imagination. And then you get that added upside of maybe they give Kyler one more week off, or DeAndre Hopkins can't play, and we see there's a little bit more value shift towards Seattle. So I'm not in love with Seattle this week. I do think that last week's game was an anomaly. They're much, much better than the showing that they showed in Green Bay a week ago. Worst case scenario, Kyler Murray plays. The offense is completely, goes back to what it was earlier in the year. And I think this is the right price. That's the worst case scenario. So for me, I think there's just a lot of upside in Seahawks money line. And I think it's worth throwing a punt on it, as you guys would say, Sully.
like Tony Romo said towards the end of the broadcast last night, Seahawks are going to be fine. Fine. Use that word, fine. Yeah. We got 3 wins this season. But yeah, no, look, I like the spot 2.2. You can back the Seahawks and the money line currently at matchbook.com. Drew, you expect an over in Las Vegas, the Bengals come to town.
Yeah, like the Swallows in summer, Sully.
There you go.
The Bengals in the over and the Bengals and Raiders. My goodness, this was 49 on the open, which I did do a triple take on. This is one of those games where you have 2 very, very competent offenses again, and and you're playing in a controlled environment. The Raiders obviously did not put up a ton of points last week. Some of that was fluky. You get another week with Deshaun Jackson in practice. Presumably, he works out how he understands the stadium and won't be running away from the end zone this time. But realistically, the Raiders' decent chance to bounce back against the Bengals defense that I find to be overrated. If the Raiders are going to run out that sort of basic, the beatable coverages against the Bengals team that has 3 bona fide options in the passing game, then they're going to be in trouble in this one. This just everything about this game, the closeness, the available players, everything screams shootout. The way that I look at kind of game state here. If this ends up being the field position, field goal type of game, I'll be absolutely shocked. Bengals don't really have the interior pass pressure that can kind of bring out the worst in Derek Carr. So Derek Carr should be comfortable in this one and be able to pick apart this team down the field. The over favorite total on the board for me at even at the current price of 50.
Yeah, 50 is the total there, 1.97 at matchbook.com. Assume you broke the news earlier about Mr. Flacco starting in New York for the Dolphins. Like I said, the line has moved. Dolphins -3, 1.88, your best bet of the week.
So first of all, I didn't expect Joe Flacco to start. I don't think that it makes any difference whatsoever. Joe Flacco is 37 years old, and the last time he looked somewhat comfortable was like in one game in 2020 against the Pats in primetime, where he threw some play action bombs down the field. But can Joe Flacco run away from defensive back blitzes? Because the Dolphins are like one of the most heavy blitzing defenses in the league right now. They blitzed Lamar Jackson to death. They will do the same against Joe Flacco. I just checked it out. Last season in 2020, when Joe Flacco started at Miami, where the Jets lost 0-24, Brian Flores called a blitz on 20 passes of Joe Flacco. They will do the same this year, and they will play some man coverage behind it. And I just don't see how Joe Flacco or Mike White or Zach Wilson is able to put up a lot of points here. And on the other side, the Jets, I think they completely stink. They might just have the worst defense in the league right now. And the Dolphins have a very RPO-centric offense with Tua Tagovailoa. Lots of underneath stuff, and the Jets have by far the worst defense in the league against underneath passes up to 10 air yards. They rank 32nd EPA per play, 32nd in yards per play, 32nd in success rate. Every time you throw a short pass against the Jets, there's the opportunity for a long touchdown run, basically. And I think that's the path to success for the Dolphins. I mean, I'm not expecting any kind of breakout from the Dolphins offense anytime soon. Still, Will Fuller on IR, Devontae Parker on IR. So I also don't know whether Tua Tagovailoa can be a solid starter in the NFL by any stretch. I don't know that, but I think Tua in that RPO-centric offense with Jalen Waddle, with Mike Gesicki throwing to Myles Gaskin short over the middle, I think that should just be enough to win a game by more than 3 points against arguably the worst team in the league when your defense is slightly getting better towards league average and can blitz the shit out of Joe Flacco.
Yeah, the Mike White experience was a fleeting one. It was fun. We had a
fun
fortnight. We had a fun
his jersey is in the Hall of Fame. It was not fleeting. It lasts forever now. It's they sent his jersey to the Hall of Fame.
Incredible stuff. You got to give him credit, though. He's not one of these check down guys. He actually legitimately thought he was a first round pick in his head. I mean, confidence is great, guys. Don't ever knock it. Don't ever knock confidence. Gotta love it. Rob Pizzola, the Washington football team, the Ron Rivera revenge game, or Cam Newton revenge game, whichever way you want to look at it. On the other side, Washington getting 3.5 in Charlotte, even money.
This one is kind of hilarious to me because if you looked at the look ahead lines on this game, pretty much across the board, they were Carolina -1.5 or -2. And we have Washington, who beats the Bucks, who a lot of people have as being the top team in the league by double digits. And this line has moved up to Carolina 3.5 through 3 because Cam Newton is back. I'll pay to see that Cam Newton is back. He played 9 snaps last week. Most of them were situations that he excels in, short yardage, goal line, etc. He's going to have to move the ball up and down the field. And yes, I know Washington has some key injuries. Chase Young is out, but I think this is just way too much of an adjustment. There's very little separating these two teams. There is a lot of familiarity with Ron Rivera and Cam Newton as well. And the Washington team had a bye before Tampa Bay. They got Brandon Scherf back on the offensive line. There's a decent chance Sam Cosmi plays this week. This is a team that's getting healthier too on offense, and a team that honestly had some very unlucky games earlier this season with numerous trips into the red zone where they turned it over, missed field goals, couldn't score. And I don't think that we're evaluating or valuing Washington correctly because of those games. So I think this is just, I would have to make Cam Newton like an above average quarterback in the league to get to this price this week. And I think there's a very, very low likelihood of that being the case.
That celebration last week was a bit over the top.
It was pretty nuts.
See, it's good viral stuff for Twitter or whatever, but you're like, come on, man. Seriously.
He compared himself to Moses also. Let's not forget.
It's not going to be great. It's not going to be great when people are able to splice together like these clips of him throwing interceptions and then him like, I'm back. Another interception.
I'm back. All short of Lazarus, he compared himself to. Drew Dinsick, the Ravens laying 6 against the Bears. That even money as well.
Yeah, first of all, I'll say I completely agree with fading Flacco. I completely agree with fading Cam. Those are 2 very solid looks already on the card. I will add fading Justin Fields in a game where he's going up against a defense that brings exotic blitzes better than basically any other defense in the NFL. If you look at the splits of Justin Fields' young career, when blitzed, he is like all-time bad. And for whatever reason, Matt Nagy unwilling to tweak the offense in a way that improves that level of performance or even protects him from those type of situations. So I think this is a Wink Martindale licking his chops type of an opportunity for the Ravens going up against the Bears team that the blueprint is out there for really how you can make them struggle. We saw Tampa Bay pull it off masterfully. We saw Cleveland Browns pull it off masterfully. Now it's the Ravens' turn to do it. A lot of people kind of thrown off the scent of how bad the Bears are based on that Monday Night Football game against the Pittsburgh Steelers. Well, the Steelers stink. And I think realistically, the Ravens offense matches up well against the Bears defense that's not especially talented either. Lamar Jackson's speed matches up really well against the linebacking core here for the Bears. Bears don't have much of a pass rush in general. I'd like to see what John Harbaugh has up his sleeve with 10 days to prepare for a Bears team that is very beatable here. So I laid the 6 points with the Ravens. I know they're on the road. I know they haven't played especially great this season, but this is a decent spot for them to shine.
All right. Yeah, like the case. 7 bets in total for week 11 of the NFL season. Insights.matchbook.com for full recap of those bets as ever. Drew, you're a healthy scratch next week for our Thanksgiving Eve podcast. We're going to miss you, man. It's been a while since you've been out of this. First time in 3 years, I think. Yeah.
I'll be with you guys in spirit.
Okay, good to know. Good to know. My thanks to Rob. My thanks to Suma. We'll be back again next Wednesday. Just the 3 of us or whatever. We'll talk to you then. Best of luck with your bets. Insights.matchbook.com for a full recap. Until then, goodbye for now.